Welcome dear students. Today we are going to discuss about Sanskrit language, its origin and the development. This module envisages the development of indigenous language Sanskrit and the dominance of Sanskrit language as an elite one in India between 300 BC to 750 AD. The development of literature in Sanskrit in its early stage will also be studied. Learning outcome. After the completion of this module, one would get a first-hand knowledge about the origin of Sanskrit. This module will help to explore the development of Sanskrit language and literature. Now, introduction. The period under study is an epoch-making one so far as the developments in art, architecture and literature are concerned. The emergence of new political powers from Central Asia making their inroads in the North India laid a profound impact on the art and literature as well. The cultural acculturation and emergence of new schools of art are remarkable. Prior to the development of modern Sanskrit derivatives, a group of languages known as the Middle Indo-Aryan language Prakritis arose from India's classical language. These were the ancient vernacular, dialectics, and several of them became significant literary vehicles in their own right. Pali, the most well-known of this group, is still the canonical language of Buddhism in Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia. Other Prakrit languages such as Suraseni, Maharashtri, Magadhi and Gandhari embody various aspects of the Brahmanical Hindu and Buddhist literatures. In this lecture, we will discuss ancient languages Sanskrit, Prakrit, Pali and Tamil. But this lecture will primarily focus on the Sanskrit language. Dear students, first let us discuss ancient languages and their background. In the literary sense, language refers to a system of speech based on communication, a collection of sounds that have the same meaning among a set of listeners. The language family from which the languages of the subcontinent derive is Indo-Aryan. The Indo-European language and the Indo-Aryan language family are connected. The non-metrical stress of Sanskrit was defined in Panini's grammar circa 500 BC and Tolakapiyam's grammar of Tamil dates from the start of the Common Era. Even though modern linguistics has existed and been studied in the West since the early 19th century, it has a lot in common with how Sanskrit was discovered by Europeans in the late 18th century. Colonial era scholars familiar with Latin and Greek were struck by the resemblance of the Sanskrit language, both in its vocabulary and grammar, to the classical languages of Europe. In the Oxford Introduction to Proto-Indo-European and the Proto-Indo-European World, Mallory and Adams illustrate the resemblance with the following examples of cognate form with the addition of Old English for further comparison. English, Old English, Latin, Greek, Sanskrit dictionaries, we have a common resemblance of the words like mother or modor or matar or mitir or matar or mother, father, fadir, pater, patir, pitar, father, brother, bropor, frater, ferter, bratar, brother, sister, sister, soror, eor, swasar, sister, son, sunu, hios, sunu, son, daughter, daughter, thogitar, dohitra, and daughter, cow, ku, boss, boss, gow, and cow, tame, timber, tam, timber, domus, dom, dam, house, tam, build. The correspondences suggest some common root and historical links between some of the distant major ancient languages of the world. The Indo-Aryan migration theory explains the common features shared by Sanskrit and other Indo-European languages. According to this theory, the original speakers of what became Sanskrit arrived in South Asia from a region of common origin somewhere northwest of the Indus region during the early 2nd millennium BC. Evidence of such a theory includes the close relationship between the Indo-Iranian speech and the Baltic and Slavic languages, vocabulary exchange with the non-Indo-European Uralic languages, and the nature of attested Indo-European words for plants and animal life. The prehistory of Indo-Aryan languages before Vedic Sanskrit is unclear, and various hypotheses place it over a fairly wide limit. According to Thomas Burrow, based on the relationship between various Indo-European languages, the origin of all these languages may possibly be in what is now Central or Eastern Europe, while the Indo-Iranian group possibly arose in Central Russia. The Iranian and Indo-Aryan branch separated quite early. It is the Indo-Aryan branch that migrated to eastern Iran and then south into South Asia in the first half of the 2nd millennium BC. Once in ancient India, the Indo-Aryan language underwent rapid linguistic change and morphed into the Vedic Sanskrit language. Sanskrit, in terms of its literary association, is classified into two different periods, the Vedic and classical. Vedic Sanskrit is found in the Vedas, sacred texts, especially the Rig Veda, the Puran, and the Upanishad, where the most original form of language was used. The composition of the Vedas is dated to the period of 1000 to 500 BCE. Till then, Sanskrit had a robust tradition of being used consistently through oral communication. This early Sanskrit is rich in vocabulary, phonology, grammar, and syntax, which remains undiluted in its purity to this day. It consists of 52 letters in total, 16 vowels and 36 consonants. These 52 letters have never been tweaked or changed and are believed to have been constant since the beginning, thus making it the most perfect language for word formation and punctuation. The Sanskrit language has been the traditional means of communication in Hinduism. Sanskrit literature holds the privilege of being used in ancient poetry, drama, and sciences, as well as religious and philosophical texts. The language is believed to have been created by observing the natural development of sound created in the human mouth, thus considering sound as an important element of language formation. This is one of the key reasons why Sanskrit has been affluent in poetry and its eloquent quality of bringing out the best meaning through perfect sounds that are soothing to the human ear. Vedic Sanskrit also contains abstract nouns and philosophical terms which are not to be found in any other language. The consonants and vowels are flexible enough to be grouped together to express subtle ideas. In all, the language is like an endless ocean without a base due to its reach, complexity, and hundreds of words to broach a single meaning or object. Dear students, let's now talk about classical Sanskrit. Classical Sanskrit has its origin in the end of the Vedic period when the Upanishads were the last holy text to be written down, after which Panini, a descendant of Pani and a grammar and linguistic researcher, introduced the refined version of language. Panini's timeline is assumed to be around the 4th century BCE when he launched his work Ashtadhyayi, which means 8 chapters, forming the only available foundational and analytical text of Sanskrit grammar. It is considered to be the only source of Sanskrit grammar and vocabulary today, because everything that existed before had never been put down except via their mention in Panini's Ashtadhyayi. The Ashtadhyayi of Panini contains 3959 systematized rules that are undiluted in brevity, full of wonderful analysis, explanation, and preferential usage of the language and word formation. The language is so vast that it has more than 250 words to describe rainfall, 67 words to describe water, and 65 words to describe earth, among other illustrations. This proves the magnanimity of Sanskrit when compared with current modern languages. However, difference the subcastes of Hinduism may be in their dialect, race, creed, and rank. Sanskrit is considered and accepted as the only blessed language, giving rise to the only available sacred literature by all, even though India has a depository of 5,000 spoken languages. Panini was responsible for the standardization of the language, which to this day remains in use in multiple forms. Sanskrit as a spoken language is scarce and is spoken in some regions in India, some even claiming it as their first language, but it is loudly mentioned as one of the 14 original languages of India in its constitution. It is largely used in Carnatic music in the forms of bhajans, shlokas, stotras, and kirtans, all indicating various hymns to the gods and songs and mantras of God worship. Dear students, let's now talk about the literature in Sanskrit. Early India was rich in the production of creative literature. Much of this was in Sanskrit, the older language in the Indian subcontinent and the one best associated with ancient times. Creative literature was composed in classical Sanskrit, different from old Vedic Sanskrit, which was systematized by the Panini, the great grammarian in circa 5th century BCE. The two epics that are Mahabharata and the Ramayana are early examples of creative and narrative literature in this language. But the phenomenon properly starts in the 1st century CE with a new genre that quickly became very popular. This was Kavya, which means literature as a form of art, as distinct from scripture Agama, history Itihasa, and practical treatise Shastra. Kavya includes not only poetry, Sargabandha or Mahakavya, but drama, that's Natya, tale, that's Katha, and biography, Akhayivika or Charita. Kavya composition took the cultivation of language and theme to new heights. Its distinguishing features were alamkara or figures of speech, which embellished the language, and rasa or aesthetic experience, which governed the meaning. There were two kinds of alamkaras, Shabda alamkara that would play with the form like yamaka or rhyme, and anuprasa or alliteration, and artha alamkara that would bring out meanings like shlisha or pun, rupaka or metaphor, and atisha yokti or exaggeration. Many alamkaras could serve both functions. Rasa literally means flavor. It represents the essence of the experience of emotions bhava, like desire, fear, anger, compassion, humor, etc., that Kavya invokes in the audience. Kavya was intended to imitate the world lokasya anukarana and to entertain and produce delight, priti, harsha, vinoda. Theoretically, it was meant for all classes and castes, but some of the poetry and prose was too dense and rich to be understood by any but the educated and refined. The earliest Kavyakaras were Ashwagosha and Bhasha, dated between the 1st and 3rd century CE. The former wrote the Buddha Charita and the Sundarananda, two epic poems inspired by the Buddha's life and episodes to do with it. Bhasha was a great playwright who is believed to have written a large number and variety of plays that dealt with gods and mythological characters on the one hand and with princes and princesses and merchants and other commoners on the other. These include Swapna Vasavadatta, Karnabhara, Dharidacharadatta and Avimarka. From the 3rd to 5th century CE come the works of two great playwrights and poets. Sudharaka's Mrichikatika is a brilliant comic romantic play in 10 acts about the love between a poor merchant and a talented courtesan. It displays all the 9 rasas. Kalidasa, the world famous poet, wrote a total of 7 works, 3 plays, Abhijana Shakuntala, Malavika Agnimitra and Vikramorvishya, and 4 poems, Meghadutta, Ritu Samhara, Kumhara Sambhava and Raghuvamsa. These drew on mythological or royal stories, infusing them with humor and critical comments, and specialized in the development of emotions and in beautiful lyricism. Of all the classical languages that have developed in the course of human history over thousands of years, Sanskrit occupies a distinctive position for several reasons. Its antiquity lies in the distant mist of time during which Sanskrit has produced a truly massive collection of texts on a whole variety of subjects. A single epic, the Mahabharata, can contain within it the whole of the Odysseus and the Iliad with plenty of space left over. The multiple creativity expressed through Sanskrit is unrivaled both in its sheer volume and also the versatility of its content. The language itself is elegantly constructed. In the words of William Jones, who founded the Asiatic Society in Calcutta on 15 January 1784, which played such an extremely valuable role in initiating Indological studies. I quote, "The Sanskrit language is more copious than Greek and Latin and more exquisitely refined than either." The multifaceted beauty of Sanskrit comes out especially in its chanting, and chanting of the Rig Veda has been accepted by UNESCO as an intangible heritage of mankind. The language is exquisitely structured, and the masterwork of the great grammarian Panini, the Vyakarna Sutra, is one of the intellectual wonders of the world. The Sanskrit alphabet is designed in such a way as to follow the norms of vocal enunciation and has in fact been adopted not only by our national language Hindi but also by a number of regional languages. As far as Hinduism is concerned, the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Puranas, the great epics and numerous other works in Sanskrit form the basis for this great religion which has a billion followers around the world. The Sanskrit language is more abundant than Greek and Latin and more exquisitely refined than either. The multifaceted beauty of Sanskrit comes out especially in its chanting, and chanting of the Rig Veda has been accepted by UNESCO as an intangible heritage of mankind. The language is exquisitely structured, and the masterwork of the great grammarian Panini, the Vyakarna Sutra, is one of the intellectual wonders of the world. The Sanskrit alphabet is designed in such a way as to follow the norms of vocal enunciation and has in fact been adopted not only by our national language Hindi but also by a number of regional languages. Dear students, let's now discuss area of influence under Sanskrit. For nearly 2000 years, Sanskrit was a language of a cultural order that exerted influence across South Asia, Inner Asia, Southeast Asia, and to a certain extent East Asia. A significant form of post-Vedic Sanskrit is found in the Sanskrit of Indian epic poetry, the Ramayana and Mahabharata. The deviations from Panini in the epics are generally considered to be on account of inference from Prakrits or innovations and not because they are pre-Paninian. Traditional Sanskrit scholars call such deviations Arsha, meaning of the Rishi, the traditional title for the ancient authors. In some contexts, there are also more Prakritisms borrowing from common speech than a classical Sanskrit proper. Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit is a literary language heavily influenced by the Middle Indo-Aryan languages, based on early Buddhist Prakrit texts which subsequently assimilated to the classical Sanskrit standard in varying degrees. Dear students, now let us see the influence of Sanskrit on other Indian languages. Sanskrit has greatly influenced the languages of India that grew from its vocabulary and grammatical base. For instance, Hindi is a Sanskritized register of Hindustani. All modern Indo-Aryan languages, as well as Munda and Dravida languages, have borrowed many words either directly from Sanskrit Tatsama words or indirectly via Middle Indo-Aryan languages Tadbhava words. Words originating in Sanskrit are estimated at roughly 50% of the vocabulary of modern Indo-Aryan languages, as well as the literary forms of Malayalam and Kannada. Literary texts in Telugu are lexically Sanskrit or Sanskritized to a great extent, perhaps 70% or more. Marathi is another dominant language in Western India, which derives most of its word and grammar from Sanskrit. Sanskrit words are often opted in the literary texts in Marathi over corresponding colloquial Marathi word. There has been a profound impact of Sanskrit on the lexical and grammatical systems of Dravidian languages. As per Dalby, India has been a single cultural area for about 2 millennia, which has helped Sanskrit influence on all the Indic languages. Iminau and Burrow mention the tendency, I quote, for all four of the Dravidian literary languages in South to make literary use of total Sanskrit lexicon indiscriminately, unquote. There are a large number of loan words found in the vocabulary of the three major Dravidian languages, Malayalam, Kannada and Telugu Tamil. Also has significant loan words from Sanskrit. Krishnamurti mentions that although it is not clear when the Sanskrit influence happened on the Dravidian languages, it might have been around 5th century BCE at the time of separation of Tamil and Kannada from a stage. The land words are classified into two types based on phonological integration. Tadbhava, those words derived from Prakrit, and Tatsama, unassimilated land words from Sanskrit. Some of the noblest concepts known to humanity have had their origin in Sanskrit. For example, the concept of unity of all religions, Ikkam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. The concept of the entire human race as an extended single family, Vasudeva Kutumbhukum. The concept of the welfare of all and the happens of all, Bahujana Sukhya Bahujana Hitaya Cha. The prayer that all beings should remain happy, free from disease, may all beings behold auspicious sights, and may none undergo any suffering. Sarve Pishukina Santu Sarves Santu Nirmaya Sarve Badrini Pashyantu Makashichit Dukkha Bhagbhavate. An exhortation that we must awake, arise and move across the sharp-edged, dangerous and boldly push forward towards our chosen goal, Utishata Jagrata, Prapya Varana Bodhatya, Kashurasya Dhara Nishtha Durtaya Durgam, Phatasat Kavayo Vadanti are some of the great concepts that in the Sanskrit classics and that can help to provide a life-affirming ideology for the emerging global society. Dear students, that was all about today's lecture regarding Sanskrit language, its origin and the development. Hope you all have understood it well. We shall meet again with a new topic. Till then, take care and goodbye.